Welcome to the Fowl Front Podcast, a part of the Waypoint Outdoor Collective. I'm your host, Ben Page, and this is your source for hunting, outdoors, and conservation conversations. In an eclectic and sometimes unorganized fashion, I appreciate you coming by. All right, welcome to the Fowl Front Waterfowl Podcast. We have kind of a cool episode today. I've got my good buddy and friend of the show, Andrew Barthel, on. I say that right, Andrew?
Barthel, but
Barthel.
It is what it is.
Yeah, of course. Should have asked. That's the one question we didn't ask. Anyways, I got Andrew Barthel and I got Ian Burrows of Powderhook, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But we have a really cool topic. I asked the Facebook group a couple weeks back. I said, hey, we're going to play a game, whoever has the best topic to talk about, I'm going to have them onto the podcast, and we're going to do an episode with them about it. And Andrews got voted number one. And so pretty interesting way to do things, probably. At any rate, kind of the topic intro here is that every year we're succeeding in getting new hunters that are entering the marsh that have never had a mentor or very little experience in waterfowl hunting or public land hunting in general. Maybe even some people who have a few years under their belts with some bad habits that detract from the greater good of hunting and public land use, and then the health of hunting and ultimately conservation. So in this episode, we are going to talk about some of the most common and some of the worst transgressions out in the marsh to help you not be an a-hole, or at least to help you not be an ignorant a-hole. So Andrew, how did we get here?
Ben, it's just one of those things that everybody runs into, everybody has to deal with. I know that a lot of people talk about it, but it's just, there's so many things in this certain topic that can't be stressed enough. There's just so many things that are included into it that can make or break you as a hunter. They can make or break people around you, whether it's you bringing new people on and then they have a bad experience because of things that could have been avoided, or or it's an indirect thing where you create a bad experience of another party of, say, maybe some novice hunters or some new hunters that they just get turned off to it because they get out there and they just have a terrible experience. And on the note of the more experienced guys that just learn how to do things maybe not the most ideal way, it's just a good topic to run over every now and again, especially with the season fast approaching. So I just felt like that would be a good one to go off of, and evidently a lot of other people did too. So we'll run with it.
Yeah. Now, where are you out of, Andrew?
I'm in Northeast Oregon. I'm right off the Columbia River, just 10 miles south of Washington State. I'm about 2 hours west of Idaho. So right off the Blue Mountains. It's high desert country, gets cold in the winter, hot in the summer. Experienced all 4 seasons pretty good over here. Lots of wildlife, lots of things to do. So it's not a bad place to be for an outdoorsman.
Awesome, man. And then, I've been keeping Ian over in the corner there for a little bit. Ian, what's up?
Hey, good evening.
What's going on, man?
This will be the part you have to edit out. I'm here for the podcast.
You are.
That's what I'm bad. I'm doing a really bad job.
This is good, man. Who are you, Ian?
There we go. I can work with that. Say it again.
Who are you, Ian?
My name is Ian Burrow, and I work with the mobile phone app Powderhook, which is a free app that not only shows you where you can go hunting in terms of public land mapping across all 50 states, but it also provides a social and community aspect to it where you can interact with other hunters. So if you are a new hunter and you're trying to get your feet wet and get a basic understanding of where to go and what to do, you have a lot of tools at your disposal. And at the same time, if you've been hunting for years and years, not only can you help pass on the tradition and our natural heritage, but you can also learn more yourself in terms of when you're traveling to hunt to a place you've never been before. And our app is designed so that you can communicate with people in a geographic region. So you can get, instead of doing a super broad Google search, you're going to get information that's tied to that region that you're looking at. So anyway, I work with Powderhook, and I'm a very big advocate for public land, and I absolutely love to hunt.
Yeah, I thought it was really important to have you on because you do a lot with mentorship and a lot with public land stuff. And I'm sure, well, actually, I know after all of us have kind of been trading, text messages and phone conversations, we've got some experiences that led us to this topic. And so I'm pretty excited about that. You also do you want to talk a little bit about your public pursuit or not?
Yeah, I can highlight that real quick. I started a project last year called Public Pursuit, and that was a result of drawing every single tag in the state of Kansas all at once. And so I set out to hunt every single game species in the state in 1 year on public land. And this year, unfortunately, I didn't draw every single tag again, which kind of would have been even more nuts. But I'm carrying the project forward, and I'm going to talk more about that here in a few weeks when I release the opening to what I'm calling Volume 2. But ultimately, it's a project dedicated to working with industry leaders in the outdoor space and working with getting more people outside and using public land as the kind of the means to get someone outside for the first time or to get someone back into the field who hasn't been hunting in a while. So like I said, I'll talk more about that in a few weeks when we're ready to release the whole project. But needless to say, I'm a huge advocate for public land, and I am an adult onset hunter, and public land is what made it possible for me to develop this huge passion of mine of hunting.
Awesome. Yeah. Andrew, have you heard of Powderhook yet?
Actually, when you told me that you were having Ian on, I looked him up. I looked up Powderhook, and I actually downloaded the app and created a profile to see what it was all about. And it looks very useful, actually. I was genuinely surprised at the ease of the experience when you open it up and it has the weather stats and all that good stuff on it. I was just like, man, this is actually pretty well thought out, and it's definitely it makes it really easy. I was surprised that it's such a simple idea, but it's complex at the same time, but it's extremely useful. So I'm looking forward to networking and being able to use it this season for more than just waterfowl. When I go up turkey hunting, when I go elk hunting, I'm going to use it. So I'm excited about it. It's pretty cool.
My favorite thing is, using Onyx and like some base map stuff. It's the public lands don't pop out at you as much as they do on Powderhook's map. That's my favorite thing. Like that's how you find it. It's very clear, and you can see where the public land is. I don't know, so. But of course, all right. So. Kind of to introduce all of this, I wanted to bring up what I kind of call the parable, and I hope that that's the right kind of word. But hunting numbers are declining, and at the same time, overcrowding is becoming more prevalent through the loss of huntable land. The figures, which a lot of people still refuse to acknowledge, and continuing like the denial of facts and rejections of plausible evidence-backed truths, kind of like politics. And I'm just going off of, the hunting numbers that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service reports and then all that other stuff. But I think the reasons that you're seeing more people on your particular marsh is because of, one, the decrease in public land, two, the decrease in the newer hunters' ability to find and obtain private land permission. I think those things both at the same time kind of lead to this weird false image of, oh my gosh, we have more hunters now than we've ever had. At the same time, we also are using more public land than we ever have, just due to the amount of access that there is out there. Ian, what do you think of that?
I think that's a very accurate statement across the board. There's a lot of research and a lot of thought behind why there is a decline. And you can interpret that a few different ways, but simply put, there's no way to interpret the fact that public land and access to public land for outdoor recreation, specifically hunting, is in fact on the decline. And that can and has been tied to, it creates a direct correlation to the loss in or the decline in hunter participation. So it's a very interesting scenario that it paints, is that you have a voice somewhere that says, hey, we're losing hunters, which of course has its terrible second and third order effects. But in conjunction with that, when you actually go to a marsh, you feel like we're actually gaining hunters, and it's kind of limiting or maybe hindering your experience. And so it creates it's like a dichotomy. But the fact remains that we're losing numbers in terms of acreage for where you can hunt, and we're losing numbers in terms of people who are hunting. And both of those things need to be addressed immediately.
Yeah. Andrew, obviously there's a couple, probably some experiences that you've had that have kind of proven this parable and the reason that we're having this conversation. I was just going to ask you if, one of the guys in the group, Alex Tenari, he asked, hey, what bad public land experiences have we had? And I figured you should start us off.
All right. One of the big ones that sticks out to me when I was kind of brainstorming thinking about it, and it was kind of a brief experience, but it was a prominent one at the same time. We were set up in this. It was a popular spot to hunt in the area, and it was out on the Columbia, and we come out there and realize that the water is a lot lower than what we had anticipated and what it was just the day before, because we actually live where we're at. It's the McNary Dam is right next to us, so they can obviously regulate the water level drastically if they have to let water through. So we come in that morning in the water. It's almost like a mud flat in this cove. So we're forced to hunt a spot that we don't usually hunt on this cove, and we're all set up, and it's just soupy, muddy, ankle deep water. And we're set up, and 10 minutes before shooting light, we hear just dogs barking and people ranting and raving, like these big bellowing duck hunter voices just walking through the cattails across the cove here. And they're acting like they're going to walk to the main spot that we planned on hunting. But then they get down there and realize that, the water's low. So they literally, we have birds flying all over the place. They're literally walking 15, 20 yards out in front of us, or out in front of our decoys, our furthest decoy. And it was just, you go out there and you already deal with the hiccups of getting out there and then having to make adjustments to the situation. And you're already kind of on edge because you're wondering, okay, is this actually going to work? And then for these guys to come walking out there, and this in particular party, I mean, they were seasoned hunters. We're talking 20, 30 years experience. They're just walking right past our decoy spread, just complete disrespect, didn't acknowledge the fact that we were right there. And to rub some salt on the wound, they start shooting at the birds that are they don't even have their decoys set up, and then they start shooting at the birds that are decoying our spread. As they're out in their decoys, they're shooting at our birds, and we're sitting there trying to decoy birds. So it's just that was probably the most prominent one that stuck out to me, just because it was so blatant and so negative. And like I said, these weren't 15-year-old kids that didn't know any better. You know what I mean? These were seasoned waterfowlers that should have known better. They should have gotten out there sooner. I don't know if they got beat to their plan A and this was their plan B. I assumed that that's what happened. This was just a backup plan, and they ended up just showing up right before shooting light, because it is kind of a walk-in where we were if you don't have a boat. And with them being older guys, I'm sure they took forever to walk out there.
Yeah.
But it was just, we ended up doing fine. Eventually, I mean, they didn't stick around, but maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and then they were out of there. But it was the blatancy behind what they were doing to us. It was just like, are you serious? Like, are you really doing this right now? And it took everything in all of us to just keep our cool and not let the situation escalate. So
I was gonna wait to say like what my plan C is. I usually have a plan A, and then I've always got a plan B. And then plan C is usually asking the people that are at my plan B if, hey, do you mind if I hunt? I will take some pictures for you, and we can add more decoys, and I'll be really cool. I promise. That's usually my plan C, is asking the people at plan B if I can hunt with them. Yeah. So, Ian, what about you, man?
I've only had one really negative experience on public land that involves other hunters. And it wasn't waterfowl related. Sorry.
That's fine.
But it was the day before the opening day of deer season. And I had spent quite a bit of time scouting a particular piece of land. I felt pretty confident in it. And the night before, I was coming back after like kind of a final setting my ducks in a row. I'm ready for tomorrow. And I bumped into a gentleman, and we talked for a while. And he said, yeah, I try to come out here maybe once every year or 2 years. I really like hunting here. Where are you going to hunt? And so I kind of outlined, hey, this is what I know. This is what I'm trying to accomplish here. And last year, because I had a mule deer tag, I wasn't looking to harvest a white-tailed buck. In Kansas, you can only harvest one antlered deer a year. So since I had kind of I'll go as far as to say coveted mule deer tag, I was just looking to harvest a white-tailed doe. Anyway, so I made that very clear. I thought that was kind of like a good relationship thing since we didn't know each other. So yeah, upfront honesty, this is what I'm looking to accomplish. And I'm going to go sit over here tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. And he looked over and he said, yeah, I'm going to go sit over there at 5 a.m. Completely opposite side of the field. I was like, oh, that's perfect. Anyway, fast forward to the next morning, I get set up and the gentleman walks directly in front of me and he sets up, maybe 50 yards away. And it was, I had to move because there's no way that I could safely hunt without the risk of a bullet being somewhere close to him. So that was really frustrating for me, especially because we had the conversation the night before and I thought it was really amicable. And I was, I had told him what I'd seen that year, that fall, as I'd been scouting. And sure enough, I get up and move, and I never have a shot opportunity that day. And right at sunrise, he shot a deer and walked out of there. So that was a pretty negative experience for me that left me rather salty. But on that note, I do want to get this out there that I think, in a way, that was kind of like a rite of passage for me. Because I think that's just a very real aspect of public land hunting, and you have to be mentally prepared for that. We need to be stewards of the land and the resource and the relationships. And so I think a negative experience like that, if anything, it's only helped me in the way that I interact with people and talk about public land moving forward to, case in point being today, this podcast. It's something that we need to talk about. We need to talk about it with other people, whether they've hunted for 50 years or they're just getting into hunting. We need to have those conversations so that hopefully we can see a shift in that kind of interpersonal relationship out in the field in the future.
I think too often when we talk about these experiences, it comes off like we are bitching. You know what I mean? It comes off like we're complaining about it and all this other stuff, but it's really kind of just bringing it to the forefront of the rhetoric of saying, hey, man, it is not cool. I don't care, what your particular circumstance is. If you're going to go behind and, basically do bad by what we're really trying to accomplish out here. Having a conversation about, hey, you mind if I hunt with you? Or, hey, listen, dude, I was up all night with my wife and my newborn baby, and I decided to sleep in, or not sleep in. The reason I'm late to this marsh right now is because I helped my wife change a blowout diaper. That took me an extra 15 minutes to get out of the garage, and we have so much more in common with each other than all the people that are sleeping in their beds, 10, 15 miles away. And I don't know why we do this to ourselves. At any rate. So that brings, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the worst part about it is someone can have a bad experience, and that someone can be a brand new hunter. And that completely sets the stage and the tone for the way they hunt from here on out, or the fact that maybe they don't hunt.
Right.
And a lot of us, I think, lose sight of ultimately the bigger picture of just having a great day outside and understanding second and third order effects.
Andrew, how long have you been hunting?
Let's see. I'm 29 now. I've been hunting since I was probably 10, 12 years old. I've been waterfowl hunting since 2007, probably. So 15, 12 years. Would that be 12 years? Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
No, I started out big game hunting with my dad and my grandpa. We were big meat hunters. We'd go up and shoot cow elk, spikes. We'd get a over-the-counter second season spike tag. I was never really big into deer hunting. But bird hunting, I started out pheasant hunting. We got lots of pheasants out here in Eastern Oregon, and it was just it's one of those things where you just, as a kid, compared to elk hunting, when you're walking around upland hunting, you can just pretty much be a kid, as long as you listen to your dad or your grandpa or whoever is taking you, and you stay behind the firing line. You just kind of pay attention to the things that you learned in hunter safety. Then you can just have a good time. You don't have to be quiet. You can kind of tromp around, and then you might flush up a pheasant. So that's where my love for wing shooting started, was just that mean cackle coming out of the cattails or the tall grass, and watching the pheasant go down and the dog bring it back. I mean, that's really what started the fire in me for feathers. And I would definitely consider myself more of a bird hunter nowadays than anything else. It's one of those things to where I look at it kind of like an MMA fighter. They all have their avenues of expertise, and we can all be efficient hunters, but some of us just are better at certain things, just like certain fighters are better at certain things. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, 12, 15 years solid. I've been going at it. So
I think go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say the rest is history after that.
I think one interesting thing is, you were talking about the different styles. There's different public land etiquettes amongst big game, whitetail, waterfowl hunting, and fishing, and they're not all the same nuance. They're not, and so I think if you're just trying out waterfowl, you might, as a deer hunter, go, oh, okay, well, there's that dude. This place is burnt. I'm out. You know what I mean? Or, okay, this place is burnt. Or you're not understanding that you can hunt, 500 yards away from somebody, as long as you're being respectful and like taking turns or whatever it is that you're doing. So that's an interesting thing. And I'm sure that, your first negative public land experience in waterfowl hunting was probably lessened. The blow of it was lessened because, you've probably had a couple negative experiences in another hunting realm.
Yeah, when it comes to big game hunting, you got the guys, you'll be out spending hours walking around looking for something, and then all of a sudden you just hear a motorized vehicle come cruising up, and they don't see you, but they just cruise right by you, and you just stand there for the next 5-10 minutes like, well, what do I do now? These guys just came ripping through here. You know what I mean? So that's right. That's kind of the core behind most of my public land experiences as far as in the mountains, big game hunting is just kind of people just pushing their way around and not really having any regard to anybody else around them, whether it's motorized vehicles or whether they're on foot or what have you. It's just the inconsideration to the anybody else around you.
Okay, when it comes to, I think the biggest shouldn't in the marsh is crowding. And that's setting up too close to somebody. And there's a lot of factors that go into how close is something. And, when you show up to the marsh and you see somebody's headlamp, what are some of your factors of consideration?
Is that one for me?
Yeah, for both.
Okay.
Of you, yeah.
All right. So if I see headlamps, I usually try and, first I'll count the rigs. I'll see how many people are out there. And in this area, I kind of have a good idea of who drives what and who hunts with who, especially for certain areas. And I'll go out to because one of the big spots that has a high tendency of being overcrowded around here, there's a big giant cove, and then around that cove is a smaller one, and that's where that's like the money cove, because that's further out towards the river. And so if I see, my first choice if I'm going to hunt there or not is how many vehicles are there. And if there's more vehicles than if there's anywhere between 6, 7, 8 vehicles there, then I'm just going to go find a plan B, and but if I walk out, if I think that these guys are hunting with these guys and I'm only looking at 2 or 3 parties out here, then I'll get an idea of where they're at and talk to my buddies, or if I'm by myself, I'll just kind of chew it over, see, just trying to play my options as far as what the weather's like and if it's even worth going any of these other spots in the cove. And if not, then I'll go to plan B. But usually I don't just kind of walk out there and just find a spot. If I think that there's people out there and hunting the situation that I had planned on hunting, then in this area, there's plenty of other spots to go. There might not be as many birds using them, but it'll cut back on the negative experience for the day. You know what I mean? I'd rather just go and shoot 2 or 3 birds here by myself than try and come up in there and just shoot no birds because everybody else is shooting or calling or what have you. You know what I mean? So usually my decision for a spot is made up in the parking lot.
I think Andrew and I have very similar tendencies in this regard. Go to the parking lot. That's step one. Look at how many vehicles are there. And then if it's a gamble, then I just head in. And then I start looking for the headlamps. And from that point, I try and gauge as best as I can, distance and what I think is respectable. And in my opinion, it's that there's no possible way that we could end up shooting at the same thing at the same time and that no one could possibly get injured or there's any risk there. So I'm also a really if I'm outside, it's already a win. So I actually tend to not get too caught up in the whole crowded thing. I'm sure there's people out there, probably both of you, that you would see it. There's a number of cars in the parking lot, and that's like your hard pass. But for me, I'm going to go take a look for myself, and I'm going to gauge off the headlamps. And with that being said, using the headlamp method, I'll look out in the marsh and I'll figure out if there is a way for me to maneuver to what I think might be a acceptable spot for success, as long as I'm not going to be crossing paths with anybody or like unintentionally bumping into them or their spread or their setup in the dark of the night, then I'll go for it. But if there's a chance that I am going to mess something up for someone else, I'll bail and go somewhere else. But in the Midwest and in Kansas, it does get pretty tough because your access points are fairly limited. So at some point, even though it looks like the parking lot's crowded, that's just almost the nature of the beast in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I don't necessarily, I would not show up someplace on most hunts and see, 5 trucks in the parking lot and say, okay, it's not going to happen today. Usually during my scout, I consider, okay, how many different spots are there to hunt out here? And I kind of rank and file them. This is the best spot. This is the second best spot. This is the third spot, according to that day's scout. And then I say, well, okay, kind of think about it. If somebody's over there, that spot's probably no. You know what I mean? Kind of creates this really dynamic kind of ABC. D is only good if A and B aren't there. But like I said, I really am a big proponent behind wiggling in on someone's hunting experience, or just inviting them the same. I probably 5 or 6 times last year, I ended up having, the person that showed up and looked all downtrodden because I had their spot. I said, I kind of judged and said, they look like an okay guy. You want to hunt here, after giving them 30 minutes to go find a new spot. But another thing that is super, I think, important, or like something that I learned that's helpful, is if you put in a good scout and somebody is about 200 yards off of that good scout, and you're like, hey, man, this is where you need to be. A lot of times that is not met well with somebody at 3:30 in the morning. That's a hardcore duck hunter, because they're there at 3:30 in the morning, and you're telling them, hey man, you're about 250 yards off where you need to be. They say, oh no, this is good. And I say, well, I was here yesterday, and then the night before, and I'm telling you, like, this scout, you want to be over here. I'm going to hunt over there. Would you like to hunt with me? And pulling them that way, instead of you showing up and on their hunt, basically offering them a better hunt. Because you wouldn't do well if you were just 250 yards away from them, right where they wanted to be. And plus, you don't want to be that guy anyways. But yeah, that kind of leads me into the second thing. I very rarely get beat to my spots. And when I do, it's usually somebody breaking a rule or being way more hardcore by like camping or setting their decoys out at the night before, something of that nature. I just, have any of you experienced, one of those instances?
I have. In Kansas, I think that can become particularly tough. The way the regulations read and interpreting what really is too early, in terms of like legally speaking. And that makes it, it makes it tough either way you want to split the coin. But for me, going out and running into folks like that, it is frustrating. But at the same time, and not to sound like I'm on a high horse here, but at the same time, this is my biggest passion in the world. And the fact that it can be taken away by having an infraction like that, by breaking the law, is enough. That's just frightening enough for me to never, ever, ever, ever mess with it. It's just not worth it to me. So if somebody beats me because of something like that, it is what it is. It's unfortunate that exists. And I think it's a good idea to have the conversation with someone, if you can, in the marsh or in the parking lot about that. Friendly, of course. But in a lot of times I found in that regard, and for any other kind of rule or regulation or law issue that you identify, is that a lot of times people just don't know or don't understand, because a lot of these regulations are really difficult to read and interpret. It's written by a lawyer pertaining to a natural resource, and it probably hasn't been updated in 25 years. And so unless you've had a really spot on mentor, there's a good chance that a lot of people that are doing the wrong thing don't even realize it. So it kind of ties back into what we talked about at the very beginning of the episode of talking with people and establishing a good relationship right off the bat when you run into somebody in the marsh or in the field or wherever else. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on obeying the laws, and especially in the Midwest, folks camping out or showing up super early.
Andrew, you have any of those kind of laws?
Yeah, we have a lot of the property that is accessible along the river is run by the Corps of Engineers. And I don't know if you've ever dealt with the Corps, but it's very, their regulations, their rules, their guidelines, they're kind of hard to access. I mean, yeah, it's on their website, but their website's not well maintained, and you never know really how to find the exact place where you're at. But it's, there's no set camping, no campfires. In Oregon, you can't set up your decoys until 4 a.m.
4 a.m.
Yeah, 4 a.m. You can't have your decoys in the water until 4 o'clock in the morning.
I wonder, what does that stop? Because there's a lot of times I'm there at like 3:30. You know what I'm saying? I wonder what not being able to set your decoy stops up, because you're still going to be there, right? You still get there before that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
That's an interesting.
Well, to play devil's advocate, I for one appreciate that. Now, I may not necessarily agree with the time here or there, but the fact that you guys have that actually outlined in your regulation, I think that's incredible, because it's just one more thing that makes it easier for you, the hunter, to understand. Okay, this is what I need to do this ethically, to do this legally. Too easy. Whereas in our case, it's like Ben says, we show up at 3:30. Is that right or wrong? I mean, it becomes a gray area, and that just leads to a lot of problems down the road for everybody involved.
I'm a big fan of things being outlined. 30 minutes before sunrise, here's the sunrise table that we're going to use to give you the ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't use your iPhone. Don't use Weather Underground. This is the ticket. Like, this is the time. Like, this is sunrise. Add 4 minutes for every 12 miles or whatever it is. And having that all laid out for you. But that's so interesting. It's 4:30. I just find that weird. All that would do is kind of like rush my thing where I like to get out there, get my decoys out, tinker with them for 3 hours while I'm drinking my coffee, and then BSing with the guys. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Andrew.
No worries, Ben. But yeah, so that's the start of it. You can't have your decoys in the water till 4. I mean, there's people that kind of push that, half hour here, 45 minutes there. They'll just kind of just start tossing them out. But everybody that I'm usually around in some of these spots, they know that, you're not supposed to have your decoys in the water. And it's funny because like some old timers, a guy that I used to hunt with, he guided down here on the Columbia River for about 20, 25 years, and comes from a line of market hunters out of Illinois. And he said that he used to come up, and he said if people had their decoys in the water, because a lot of times back then they would just set their decoys in the water and then leave, and then make it look like somebody was there. He said he would just cut their decoy lines. I mean, it's back in the battle hunting days,
Yeah.
It's nothing I would do, but he would tell those old war stories out in the marsh, and I couldn't do anything but just laugh at him. But back to the subject, there's out on the river, there's a lot of spots that are run by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and you can go out there at any point in the night, but you can't have a tent. You can't, there's just no camping. So if you want to go sit in the duck blind with your little buddy heater, that's fine. And then you got a couple national refuges out here that you can't even go through the front gate until an hour and a half before shooting time. So there's some pretty strict time regulations on some of these spots in the area that I hunt. So, I mean, as far as people getting in there, if somebody wants to go out to some of these honey holes and sleep throughout the night, I've done it. I mean, I've slept on the ground in my waders to hold down a spot for 3 or 4 guys the next day. And now I'm the guy that has somebody do that for me. You know what I mean? So it's just one of those things to where as long as everybody knows that that's how it's supposed to be, then it is what it is. But we don't have any issues with people camping. I mean, there are people that come from out of town that kind of push those limits, or they're not aware of them. But for the most part, I don't have too many negative experiences with people just camping or being obnoxious in that sense.
Yeah, you were talking about cutting a guy's decoys lines. I was real close to doing that. I walked out to the marsh. I had my spot all picked out. I knew where I was going, and me and my buddy and I see a group of ducks sitting there. I'm like, oh man, like I don't really want to flush, 5 dozen ducks. Maybe we'll maybe we'll wait. Maybe we'll wait and get on them. I don't know. But we stood there for about 10, 15 minutes, and I was like, those are freaking decoys. And I walked over there and nobody's there. And I was like, well, this is right where I want to hunt. And there's nobody here, but their stuff's here. And so my buddy was like, well, let's just pile up all their decoys and, take them 100 yards up the way so that they'll see where they're at. And I said, no. And then obviously he's also said, well, we could also just take them too. And I said, no. All right, let's see what the deal is. And so they came in. I said, hey man, we beat you here. Obviously you beat us here at some point. Do you want to just hunt together? And they were pretty cool. And that was what turned out to be nice. It was a grandfather and his grandson. It was like his grandson's like second or third hunt. So it was, he's like, yeah, we came down here and set these out so we'd have a little bit easier, morning, and I don't get to do this often. And so that was one of the times where it was like, okay, yeah, he wasn't doing the right thing, but he was, the spirit was there. So, but yeah, I think that kind of takes up crowding and obeying the laws. I just did want to tell like one thing that super irritates me. If somebody, tell me how you'd react to this, Ian. Okay. Me and my buddy Austin, we went and we got there super early. We set up. He doesn't get to go out often. And then about half an hour before sunrise, some group of college kids, and I don't mean to be demeaning towards college kids at all, but a group of college kids comes out and they're being all loud as get up. And I said, we shine them and we're like, hey, we're hunting here. And they set up 150 yards in front of us, 150 yards, maybe 200. And they were just like, nope, we're just hunting woodies. We'll be out of here real soon. And I was like, yeah, you're like right in front of us. We're going to be, and they're like, oh, it's fine. And couldn't get them to budge. I even called the game warden, but he was half a county over. And you know what happens when you call the game warden, you both leave. So I don't know. How would you have reacted to that, Ian?
That's tough. Had it been me, I would have done what you did. And then I would have gauged it from a safety perspective. And I would have gauged it from a time perspective and basically weighed those risks, right? So, assuming safety isn't an issue whatsoever, and then I'd check the time. And if I had time to move and there was, maybe a place to move, I might move. But at the same, see, that's tough. But this is what happened. I mean, this stuff happens all the time, right? Like, that's hunting. You got to make these split-second decisions, and whatever happens, you come home like, man, if only I had gone left instead of right, I would have 1,000 limits of ducks right now. Granted, that's illegal. Yeah. You know what I mean? But my point being, it goes back to what I said earlier. I'm just so happy to like go out and hunt that stuff like that would in fact really frustrate me. But at the end of the day, if there's still a way for me to still safely hunt, I'm going to hunt. And maybe it's going to not be the best hunt of the week or the month or the season due to how close we are in proximity and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just happy to hunt, man. So not to sound like I'm a mega pushover, but I'm just super happy to get outside. So I guess that's my answer. It's probably not, maybe that's not a good, I don't know. How's the answer? Was it good enough? Was it foul front caliber answer?
Yeah. It was something. No, I'm just kidding. I think it just does. There's so many. The only reason I asked you was I wanted to just display that there's 100 ways that you can react to these things. And yeah, we can't help you other than just saying, no, be confident in what is going to make the best outcome for you. If that's okay, I don't care. I'm going to send number 2 shot steel 150 yards away while I'm shooting these birds. If that's what makes you comfortable, that's I don't recommend that because you don't want to be the guy that, even though they showed up late and they showed up way too close, you're still in charge of the safety that comes out of your gun. And then the other thing too is no one's gonna always positively react to you inviting them over to your spread or anything like that. And it's just, there's just no win situations sometimes. And sometimes that's, going sitting somewhere that you didn't want to sit, and maybe you shoot one duck, or maybe you don't shoot any ducks. But yeah. At any rate,
The other thing too is, for all you know, that day, the way the stars align, nobody's going to see any ducks, or everybody limits out in the first 5 minutes, or something in between. Like, that's all part of hunting too. Where you move to, where you go, all that stuff. I mean, it's all up in there. That's what makes it so tough, is making those decisions on how do I work with other people in the marsh, and how do I predict what a wild animal is going to do? I mean, it's a wild animal, so
yeah.
Anyhow.
All right. So we've talked about crowding. We've talked about obeying the laws, about setting up, talking about a little bit about showing up late or showing up too early. Before we kind of go back down through any more, I want to get your guys' reaction on this, what I'm about to say. I think that if you walk into the marsh with a 1 million or 1,000, what do you call it? Candle. I can't remember how you a super freaking bright light and just an absolute floodlight. I think that you're a jerk. And it comes on to, it's the same thing, right? Getting in with the smallest amount of impact on everybody else's hunt. There's dudes that walk through there with freaking Batman light. You know what I mean? And you can see them from halfway across the dang lake. And it's the same thing with airboats. You get some dude, he comes, slipping in with his boat with just his regular outboard, kicks up, 100 birds, and then they all pop back down maybe, 15, 20 minutes later, about 200-300 yards away. You get a guy that comes in slinging his mud motor. You don't see those birds again. You get a guy come in with his airboat. Those birds are halfway down the dang flyway before shooting light.
I was going to say they push back into migration when those airboats come.
Yeah, it's a significant emotional event. And where I'm like the guy that, okay, I judge the moon and I'm like, all right, hey, I can see. I'm getting out there. Like, I know where I'm going. Or I use a red lens. People always bug me when I just see them walking straight across the marsh with a million candle watts coming out of their head. It's like, do you really need that? It's a freaking, waxing crescent right now at like 70%. Like, I'm cooking my breakfast right now without a light source. I just don't understand it. What's your reactions, gentlemen? Go.
For me, I'm pretty confident in walking in with no light, to be completely honest. The spots that I hunt, I mean, as long as the moon phase is permitting and I can at least see somewhat in front of me. But a lot of people would be surprised what your eyes are able to adjust to. If you let them be in the dark, they will adjust and you'll be able to see enough to walk around. A lot of times I'll put a little light on my dog or something like that to keep an eye on him. But other than that, I mean, I'll walk through these coves to the spot and I'll scare the hell out of some of these hunters because they won't even know we're coming through. We throw our decoys up on our little boats and then we drag them through and they don't even hear us coming unless, we have to click our light on to find something in our pockets or look in the boat or something like that. But going into just other people doing that, I just think it's just a complete nuisance. I mean, some people need the light and that is what it is. It's a free country. Use your 1,000 or what is it? Yeah, 1 million lumen light or whatever.
Lumen. That's what it was.
Yeah,
lumen.
that you can shoot across the canyon and spotlight elk with. But that's just not for me. I don't see too many people using them, and I use them on the boat. when we're coming up to the bank, you got to use them to, shine in the water, and so you can see if there's any rocks coming in. So, I mean, spotlights from a boat are completely understandable. But these guys that have these military grade headlamps on top of their head that you would think it would just burn their hands if they just shined it on them. I don't get it. I mean, I spent $20-$25 on a headlamp and I'm happy. 70 lumens. I don't even care.
Ian,
I'll be truthful here. You two gentlemen have talked about and thought about light bulbs in the marsh more than I've ever considered, like, in my entire life at all. As far as personal preference goes, yeah, I'll bring a red lens with me, but that's typically like try and find something deep in my bag. But I'm usually so caught up in second guessing myself on, will there actually be ducks here today? And like, is my decoy facing the right direction? All that kind of stuff that I'm usually too distracted to get bent out of shape about other flashlights. But that being said, I know what you mean, and I have seen it. And but I'll go with that idea that, to each their own, right? So if you need a big light, so be it. Again, man, I'm just so happy to be outside and be hunting that I'm just going to go hunt, and you do you.
The happy hunter over here. Yeah, when it comes to safety, totally get it. If you're coming in with your boat, like, I don't want you to be skimping out and run into me and my decoy because you didn't have enough light. That's, of course. But yeah, don't be shining the bat signal back into every single cove. It's just unnecessary, I think. Okay, talked about flashlights and mud motors, airboats. I don't care. They're great for, I think, safety things and the game wardens and rescue people for, airboats. That's great. All that stuff's good. But I think that hunting in most deep waters where a mud motor or a regular outboard is navigable, I think you should outlaw airboats because I think it's unsafe. Having been zoomed past, because I wasn't using my headlamp, obviously, an airboat came ripping up towards me and my buddies once, and they just blow birds out, and they just let you get anywhere you want. You can literally freaking anywhere you want. And I don't know if that's a healthy thing. I think it should be a little bit harder to get to some places. Now, in the case of maybe, disabled or handicapped persons, that's fine. Sure. It should be just like a crossbow. But yeah,
you hunt ducks with crossbows?
No. Well, not that I talk about on this podcast. It's probably a legal means of take.
Yeah, crossbows are illegal in Oregon.
Are they?
So yeah.
Period, or just for duck?
No, I'm pretty sure they're illegal. Period.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're a pretty blue state over here, so we're kind of run by the masses on the west side of the state, which isn't a negative thing all the time, but sometimes they try and put their nose in a lot of our outdoors, in the business of the outdoors that they really don't have a.
Yeah. What do you, Ian? We're called Hook and Bullet. What's the other one called? Some bag and I don't know, bag and almonds. I can't remember what's it called? You got Hook and Bullet, and then you got, what is the other one? Nuts and berries? I don't know. It's like backpackers and bird watchers.
Yeah.
Which and nothing against those guys. Need them too. Better than the city slickers playing their video games all day. But I imagine, Andrew, that you have to deal with quite a bit of the non-traditional hunting outdoorsmen in Oregon.
Yeah. See, the thing about Oregon, and I could kind of speak towards Washington too, is we're really divided in half. Both Oregon and Washington, Eastern Washington and Oregon are very similar in a lot of aspects, and Eastern Washington or Western Washington, Western Oregon are the western sides of these two states are what make us blue, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you look at, a county to county map, we're talking maybe 6 or 7 counties in the state of Oregon that are blue. Everybody else is red, but the fact that all of the populace is in those counties, they're the ones that get to make the decisions. Most of the decisions, I should say. But it's out here in Eastern Oregon, it's kind of a no man's land for some of those guys. You know what I mean? Like, they just think we're a bunch of deer killing cowboys out here, which that's not really how it is. I mean, there's definitely ranches and cowboys and stuff over here, but like myself, I'm not a cowboy. I just like to shoot birds. I grew up in rural Oregon, and it's kind of a place they do come over here, especially to the national refuges that are easy to research and kind of scout on the internet. They can get a good idea, and maybe they make a trip over and they hunt for a day or two, and they're from the Willamette Valley, and then they have a good hunt, and then they just start coming every year. We definitely see Portland hunters in our area. We just categorize them as Portland hunters, even though they might not live in Portland. They might live just somewhere close to Portland, but we call them Portland hunters just as a genre. And they're easy to spot. They're kind of just their equipment, and he might run like a weird breed dog that's not necessarily made for the cockleburs and all the stuff that we have around here. But it's not that bad. I mean, even I've talked to a lot of guys that come from the west side of the state, and I've pointed them in the right direction to find some birds. They got a guy. I met a guy a couple years back. Him and his son had come over the weekend following Thanksgiving, and they were spending 3 or 4 days over here. And they had planned on just hunting this one refuge, and it had been dry. The week or two leading up there, it had really been hunted because we had a nice push of birds at the beginning of November. And he said they were just having troubles finding birds. So, I just selflessly just pointed him right to the spot that we had been hunting down on the river, gave him directions, and gave him my phone number if he had any issues. And I eventually, that following Monday or Tuesday after he had gotten home, he sent me a picture of him and his son, and they had actually shot like 12 or 13 birds between the two of them, which it made me feel good because, that hunt probably, it probably made their trip. They made memories between him and his dad that I was able to kind of help influence. They would have made memories either way, but memories in the duck blind with birds, I mean, we all got to admit those are a little bit sweeter than not having birds.
Yeah.
That's why we do it. That's why we do it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's just little things like that. They're not my ducks. You know what I mean? All this is public land, man. It's public. People get so caught up in like, oh, I don't want to share my spots. And I understand for some of you guys that are in landlocked states that don't have big rivers or big bodies of water to access. I understand honey hole, the idea behind honey holes and kind of wanting to keep those to yourself. But it's just when it comes, there's an abundance of water over here, and there's lots of waterfowl that migrate through this area. I mean, I'm talking a pivotal location for waterfowl as they come down the Pacific Flyway. And so if me sacrificing a day to hunt means pointing these guys in the right direction, then so be it. And I don't even think I sacrificed a day to hunt that day. I think I had already had plans, but I had been hunting that spot and was doing good a couple days prior. So I just told him to go there. I was like, yeah, we've been over here. And they showed up, and I ended up getting that picture a few days later. And he said he just showed a lot of genuine appreciation for it. So I'm assuming that I'll probably run into him and his son, or maybe just his son down the road. Who knows?
Yeah, that brings me to another thing too. Is if I'm ever getting out of my truck at the same time that somebody else is, I always go up, have the conversation with them while my buddies are trying to get the stuff out of the truck, which does two things, right? maybe it slows them down a little bit while my guys are still getting ready. And that's selfish. But the other thing too is it's way better to, figure out a plan that is conducive to both of you, and then getting each other's number. And that way you can kind of feel like you can get a little bit of teamwork going on out there. And especially if you show them that you're willing to say, hey man, what are you seeing? We've got birds in the spread already. Or if you see a sailor go down, and I've done this. I saw a guy, he clipped one. It came floating over near me. I finished it off for him. I told him, hey man, I got your duck over here. And that's kind of an interesting gray area legally when you think about it. But he counted towards his bag, picked it up later, and actually kind of screwed me out of a duck later in the day. But it's always better to be on the same team with the people that are sharing the marsh with you, and just positive experiences. We're sitting at like 60 minutes here, and we are still. I think we'll just mention some of these things and briefly talk about the rest of the talking points that we came up with, so that we're not sitting here for 90 minutes talking about this. But so we've talked about crowding, we've talked about obeying your laws. We haven't talked about shooting swinging birds, and I think that's one really important one that a new guy might not pick up because he's just really hungry for birds. But if you're out there in the marsh and if somebody's working birds, you can tell. And if they get close to you, obviously it goes into sky busting and all that stuff. But Ian, you ever had any issues with swinging birds, or ever even thought about it before?
Honestly, no. And I think what I've learned throughout the duration of recording this is that you two have had like way more terrible experiences than I have. So I was probably not the best person to call for the podcast. I've had like one or two, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as far as swinging birds and somebody, taking advantage of someone else working ducks and that kind of thing, there's a good chance it hasn't been a problem for me because I'm terrible at calling and my spreads make no sense. So maybe that's part of it. But from a, outside looking in, to me, that's just a kind of like a golden rule thing, right?
Well, I guess it'd be like this, right? So you're out there hunting a doe, right? And you see a guy, and you just so happen to know where he's hunting, and you see a buck working his way. Like, are you going to shoot your doe while that dude's buck is like working in at 60 yards?
Oh, that's a very good metaphor. One that makes way more sense to me. I love the waterfowl hunt, but I've probably spent more time big game hunting. Man, that's tough. That's really tough.
Yeah,
because
it comes down to like
I'm getting recorded, so yeah, I'm getting recorded. So it's like, how do I answer this so not the whole foul front community doesn't just despise me to my core, or a game warden calls me one or the other.
Do you shoot that? Do you shoot that doe? You know what I mean? Andrew, what about you, man? Like, what's your rules?
I see. I've hunted waterfowl for a long time. I know how to read them when they're in the air. I know when to call it to them. I know what call they want to hear in certain situations. I know when they don't want to hear the call. So going back to just the crowding thing, and when you are hunting around other people, and I'm all for letting a guy work birds. If he's got half a dozen, 3, 4, a single working his spread, I'll let him work. But as soon as those birds show any interest in me, I'm hammering. I'm calling at them. I'm pushing on those birds. But if they're swinging over me because they're looking at him, I'm not shooting at those birds. Even if it's a 40-yard shot, I'm not taking that shot. I would like to see if that guy can finish those birds. But as soon as they peel off because he messes something up, see, we don't have mojos here. All of our wing decoys have to be pulled by a string. So if he's flapping that thing at the wrong time and he flares them, or if his dog's moving and he flares them, I'm hammering. I'm gonna finish those birds. I would at least attempt to. I can't say it happens every time, but you just got to read the birds. If they're not your birds, if they're watching the other person, let them try and finish them. Don't be greedy. It's just a duck, Yeah. So that's where I'm at with it. I'm not going to try and reach out and take that 40, 45, 50 yard shot on birds that I'll probably just cripple anyways,
Yeah, I would like to say that as we get through the duration of this podcast, something that's really stood out to me is when we talk public land hunting etiquette, I think it is so much more prevalent in the waterfowl community. And when we think about it, I mean, where do ducks go? They go to water. And most of the time, water is somehow tied to a piece of public land, or that water itself is public. And we have interactions when we do all types of hunting, whether we're interacting with other people. But I think it's just so much more prevalent in the waterfowl world, and it makes it really interesting because just in this short podcast, we've managed to have like 1,000 hypotheticals of what would you do and what would you do, and I think that's just something seriously interesting to consider is how it at face value you think, okay, just be a good dude or dudette out in the marsh and have a great day. But then we kind of get a little bit more deeper into it, and all of a sudden there's 1,000 scenarios to consider. And I think, if anything, that tells us how important this conversation is when we are introducing hunting to someone, and when we're meeting up with someone in the parking lot or meeting up with them in the marsh, when we're inviting them, hey, like Ben says, he'll often, ask if he can jump in or invite someone into his spot. And so I think that's the key takeaway today, at least for me, is that regardless of the type of hunting you're doing, this conversation is just really, really important to have, and for us to all go home and think about these things and understand the implications.
Yeah. And kind of along the lines of that and interaction with both the birds and the other hunters out there. One thing I would say, I'm just going to talk to this in very short passing. I did talk about this on the Big Honker podcast in the episode that they had me on there, but about calling too much and trying to pick dudes' birds off of them, and how too much calling can be bad for the entire area, not just you. But yeah, just the last thing that I want to lead off with here, or excuse me, not lead off, I want to trail off with, is that I think one of the biggest reasons that we have overcrowding of public hunting lands is because new guys aren't great at getting or at securing private permission. And I kind of always take it on as myself is like, I love public land hunting, but I try to have several private land places. One, it's nice to not have to go out there and mix it up with everybody every weekend. And then two, that's one more spot that somebody who doesn't have the knowledge and the skill set that I do of finding private permission, that's one more spot open for him in that public marsh. So it kind of alleviates the pressure that we do have. And I don't know Andrew, what's your ratio of public to private?
I'd say 80-20, maybe, depending on the year and the access. There's tons of agriculture around here. I mean, tons. Yeah. And my girlfriend, her family actually owns a 4,000 acre farm. It's got a nice private pond on it. And so I definitely have access to go hunt that when need be. I kind of just keep that in my back pocket. Just kind of hunt it here and there. It's never anything I'm like just going to go burn up. It's just that plan that it's usually a plan C. It's like, well, I always have that if need be, but yeah, I'd say 80-20. But for the good spots, I usually just stick to public, man. Unless there's a really good barrel burner available on some private property. then I'll go do that. But usually, I mean, I would consider myself a thoroughbred public land hunter, dude. Public water, public land. That's how I do it.
That leads me into like the last thing I was going to say. So you go check out, I think it's episode number 16 of the Foul Front podcast. I think it's 16, or excuse me, 30. I got this. Yeah, I think it's 16. Anyways, we talk about how to get permission, and I'll probably be doing another one of those too. But the really important thing that Andrew said there is when selecting a mate for life, if you haven't yet, it don't matter how pretty she is, don't matter how much money she makes, don't matter how much you love her. Find yourself a woman that's got a lot of good land access. It's just paramount, to be the best hunter you can be.
And it just makes it so much easier to hunt with your crossbow because you're on private land.
That's right.
Yeah. It's funny because the farm and this pond is literally borders the National Refuge, the NWR. So, I mean, yeah, it's a pretty cool spot, and it's the kind of spot where when the reservoir freezes up, I'll run ice eaters out on it. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. But one thing that I did want to bring up specifically, me being a dog guy or trooper guy, is just knowing the limits of your dog. You know what I mean? Like, know what your dog can do, what's safe for your dog to do, and just stay within those limits. I've had some pretty scary situations where I've sent my dog, and the water wasn't this is just a specific situation. The water wasn't too deep. It was like 3 or 4 feet deep, but he went running across this ice to get this bird, and he actually fell through the ice. Granted, it was 3 or 4 feet deep, so I was able to just kind of walk out, and it was 1.5 inches thick. He just hit a weak spot on it and fell through. So I had to kind of do the walk backwards thing and kind of sit down and break the ice with my butt as I'm walking backwards, because it was too thick to break with my shins. But anyways, you just kind of got to keep that in mind, and don't expect a dog that you haven't worked with to be able to go out and retrieve a 75-yard blind that's across the way, and you're just out there in your decoys screaming, ruining your party's experience and anybody else in the marsh. They don't want to listen to you screaming at your dog out there, or screaming at your dog in the blind that won't sit down. And for the guys that hunt with me, my number one rule is do not shoot my dog. If my dog is in the water, you are not shooting anything out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
I know a guy personally that had his Chessie shot in the face at about 35 yards to the point where she has a hole in her ear, and she ended up losing her eye because the guy mistook her as a crippled bird swimming in the water. Okay. So yeah, it's a serious thing. I mean, I always have to remind myself that as fun as waterfowling is, and as enjoyable as it is, it's a dangerous thing that we do. It's every boat ride that you get on could be your last. You know what I mean? So it's just the biggest thing here that I want to really push onto people is just to be safe for you, your dog, and everybody else around you. There's too many things that can go wrong if you're negligent in your decisions. And just focus on safety. If you're doubting your actions, then just don't do them. Just don't do it.
Yeah, the safe choice is always the right choice.
Definitely.
I think we do get caught up in this kind of like, oh man, I'm a badass. I'm going to stay out here for another 10 minutes, even though I know that I'm going to get caught up in this. And this happened to me last season. I wanted that one last flight of mallards. And then, Ian, I don't know do you remember that big old blizzard that rolled in here around Christmas last year?
Oh yeah,
I was out in the marsh when that thing hit at 10 a.m. and it took me and my buddy Austin about what is regularly a 20-minute drive to our house. It took us 4.5 hours to get home, all because we wanted to stay for another 10, 15 minutes when had we just looked, there it comes, we need to leave. Yeah, man, we were like that picture that's on the Facebook group.
Yeah.
The banner, that's from when the blizzard was starting. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
Oh, it looks bad over there, but I think I'm just going to take some pictures of it and get a couple more minutes out of it.
Exactly. That's not, that's not a, oh man, and our wives were ticked. But anyways, yeah, the safe choice is always the right choice. All right, Andrew, was that your closeout comment right there?
Yeah, just be safe out there, guys. I mean, there's just, like I said, too many things that can go wrong. And if it can hinder anybody else in a negative way, just don't do it, or try and work around it. Just try and think of other people, and I always try and think like maybe that's a dad and his son, or maybe that's a grandpa and his grandson over there. Like, I don't want to be a dick to those guys. Not everybody that's screwing up out there is doing it on purpose, and not everybody out there is just some young kids that don't care.
Yeah.
Exactly. You'd be surprised the kind of people that sit in the duck blind for the first or maybe even the last time. You never know. You know what I mean? So you just kind of got to keep that in mind. You should always stay humble and remind yourself that it's not all about you out there, and it is public. It does belong to everybody equally, and it's an experience to be shared. That's the point of waterfowling. That's why we all love it, is that it's something that brings us all together to enjoy and have a good time and do whatever you guys do out there. We like to cook breakfast and drink coffee and do that kind of stuff. So, yeah, be safe out there, guys.
Well, yeah, man. Thanks for bringing this all up, Ian. What do you got for a closeout?
For my closeout, I'm going to skip the safety part. I endorse safety, but you guys beat that horse. I'm a proponent of be a good dude or dudette and just go. So, regardless of a negative experience you've had or that you've heard of, which I know firsthand, I've run into that a million times where someone says, where are you hunting or where have you been hunting? And I'll say, oh, this public land spot here. And they brush it off. Say, oh, it's terrible. It's awful. Public land hunting is terrible. So on and so on. And I think that right there in itself is a huge problem. Just go. So if you go in the marsh and you have a bad experience or someone gets in your way, move and stay out there and hunt and take that and grow from it and continue the conversation. But at the end of the day, you just need to go outside and you need to go hunting. And you need to do it ethically. And you need to be a good dude or a good dudette and pass that on as often as possible. That's really what I got. Oh, and of course, download Powderhook, the free mobile app, the nation's #1 hunting app.
I was waiting for him to bring it up. I knew it was coming. I was like, well,
yeah, you gave us a pretty solid. Well, you were talking about earlier. I was like, you know what? I don't have to plug this. He's already doing it for me. But honestly, that is great. I was so happy to hear that. Yeah, we need more people like you because it's people like you and Ben that interact on there and help people all across the country. Help them because there's a lot of people who are self-conscious or they're not sure what to do, and it takes guys like you and listeners on this podcast to make a difference, and that applies to making a difference on how we interact with one another in the field and in the marsh, and making a difference in advocating for our public lands and making a difference in getting more people out in the field having a great day outside.
Yeah. What's nice about Powderhook too is, as opposed to, some of your other social media stuff or other apps is, you can go on there and I know I'm only going to see outdoor stuff,
Yep.
Which is primo for me. And getting in there and being able to answer somebody's question on there. And when I go through there, somebody asks a question, I get an alert, I answer it, and I look up through like, what are some of the other comments that were made? And there's nothing about how the guy's an idiot or how he should know better or anything like that. It's just a really positive hunter helping hunter, or outdoors person helping outdoors person, conversation. So, and then selfishly, the map is pretty great. So,
yeah, I honestly really liked the fact that he had the weather on there. Like, it just keys in the weather for your location. That's super handy to me. Rather than having
you don't know all this stuff all this stuff that you're looking at that you like, it changes where you're standing in real time. And it also changes, you can manipulate it to a different place. So you can look at the, if you, for some reason, let's say you're going to go hunt in Washington, but you live in Oregon, right? You can move the map over and it's going to populate the weather, and it's going to start to populate a feed from people who live in Washington. And same with if you want to ask a question. Like I went on a hunt earlier this year and I traveled with a firearm, and I wanted to make sure my rifle was still zeroed, and I dropped the pin before the door shut on the airplane. And I asked the question, hey, where's a good range to go confirm my zero? And when I landed, I had a couple answers, and they're the kinds of answers that you can't get off of Google. It's the kind of answer that comes from someone who has lived there and experienced it. So all right, I'm taking up too much time. My plug's running long. Download the app. Duck hunting's great. Be a good dude or dudette.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate both of you gentlemen taking time out of your evening with your families to come help new hunters out. And I really appreciate it. And the one last thing I did want to say, my closeout, is I remembered what that other outdoors group is called, and it's called Bike and Hike. It's got Hook and Bullet and Bike and Hike. So
there you go.
Yeah. Not that important, but I'm sure somebody was super irritated that I didn't know that.
Somebody waited till 80 minutes, 45 seconds for you to say that. And they're like, oh, finally.
Yeah, that was actually planned. I'm so strategic.
That's how you get them.
Yeah, for sure. All right, boys. Well, hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right,
thanks,
thank
Ben.
you. Have a great night, gentlemen.
Yep.
Yeah, you too.
Bye. Sure. All right.